Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown, and we are recording stories of what it's like to navigate the 17 caregiving systems. So my good friend Donna is here today to talk about what that experience is like for her. Hi Donna, thanks for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Denise. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so we're going to start with an overview of your caregiving story. So take a minute and tell us about who you've cared for and where you are right now in your caregiving experience.
Okay, sure. Well, my caregiving experience started very young. In 1973, my father had the first of three strokes in which he lost his mobility and his speech. And he lived with my mother and me at home for 2 years before he died in 1975. My sister was away at university, but my mom and I was still at home as a teenager. Then some years later, my mother remarried, and my stepfather, he had a diagnosis of Parkinson's, and I did my best to help my mom navigate him into long-term care when his care became too burdensome for her, complex care at home. And she was in her 80s by then. And then he passed away. Our son, Nicholas, is 34 years old now. He was born in 1988 with cerebral palsy, and he is very medically complex. We ran a home hospital, a home ICU type of setting for him for 23 years before he moved out to a medical group home where he is today, and where he receives 24-hour one-to-one nursing care. He's having a great life. And then my mom died in 2018 at the age of 96 after living with dementia for about the last 10 years of her life. And my sister and I cared for her. Her care at the end was pretty complex too. And so in some ways, I feel like I am experiencing after caregiving because my mom and my dad passed and my stepfather. But I still am very much, I just got off the phone with Nicholas now. He is non-speaking, but he's a very good communicator. I understand what he's saying when he goes, mom. And so we have a coded language that I understand. So he calls here all the time. I am on the phone with his, home staff very regularly. We've been having staffing problems recently because of staff shortages, as everybody is experiencing staff shortages. So that's been a bit of a kind of crisis situation. But we're working through it, and he is safe, but maybe not as happy as he could be when things are calm and predictable. So that's that. I still have one foot, if not two, in caregiving, but I don't have to do the hands-on care 24/7 anymore. So I'm able to get sleep at night and everything. Yeah, so that's me.
And you're the author of 2 books, and I'll include links to your books in our show notes. And I'll also include a link to that fabulous interview we did maybe a year and a half ago, where you really talked about the trauma you experienced being a young child and your father's first stroke. It was such a compelling conversation about PTSD, and it really just explained so much about the responses we have,
Yeah.
which to other people seem irrational, but totally makes sense to us, that sometimes the phone ringing is a very difficult experience for us because of what happened when a phone rang.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, these memories of traumatic experiences that you experience as a near death of somebody that you love who's very close to you. If you happen to be eating a peach at the time, peaches become this sinister thing that could cause a panic attack. Like the memories of these traumatic events in caregiving become entangled and the wires get crossed. So even though there is no imminent threat to you or somebody you love, just that trigger can cause a panic response. And these sometimes go on for years, and they're very intrusive. I mean, because who wants to have a panic attack at the ring of a phone? So I think this is extremely common in caregiving because we do experience trauma. I know a lot of people who have performed CPR on their loved one.
Yeah.
You know, this is just not what we're hardwired to absorb in normal life. So it's no wonder, I think, that a lot of caregivers have PTSD.
So what's interesting is that becomes a conversation about one of the systems, which is our nervous system. So our nervous system can impact all of the other experiences within a system. And it's not just our nervous system that we're managing our caree's nervous system or other family members and their nervous system. Okay.
Mhm.
So when you think about the different systems you manage, navigate, and advocate within, which would you say are the most common that you have an experience within?
Hmm. Um, well, I will say two. One is the nervous system, because our son has chronic pain that he's experienced all his life. As an infant, he had neurological pain. I mean, this is what they call neurological distress in babies with a neurological injury. So light hurt him, sound hurt him, eating hurt him. He experienced digestion as pain. He was a child who could not be soothed. And this is very common in children with cerebral palsy or other brain injury, babies with stroke or brain bleeds, and children born addicted have the same set of neurological dysfunction and distress as well. So now he's an adult with chronic pain. So I think about the nervous system. What position is he in? If he says, "Ow, I'm looking, where's your foot? Where's your hip? Where's your back? Let's reposition you. Do you need a rescue medication?" So nervous system stuff is a big one, but the other big one is, of course, healthcare, health and social care systems, and having to navigate those to get a tiny part of his needs and our family's needs met. I mean, when you have someone who in your family you're responsible for, whose needs exceed what you can provide physically, emotionally, spiritually, it just goes way beyond what one or two people can do independently without help. Then, you know, you're forced to be a systems navigator of available supports that may be provided by your local health services or faith groups or wherever. You go anywhere to find a bit of help, and you may have to go multiple places and then piece those bits together to make a day, a week, a month in your home. What does that look like? Somebody from my church is coming on, Sunday afternoon between 2 and 4. The home care, the personal support workers coming to get my mother up in the morning, and the palliative care doctor may be visiting in the afternoon. These are systems that are very complex, that require navigation and coordination. And it takes up I was going to say most of our time, takes up a huge amount of time to advocate for them, to identify the right fit for your family, and then to coordinate all these moving pieces.
When you were describing Nicholas as an infant, you gave us such a visualization of what it would have been like for you as his mother.
Mhm. Yeah, he was my first too. We have two children, Nicholas and Natalie, and Nicholas was my first baby. So I honestly thought, Denise, that it was me. I wasn't a good mother, right? Because I didn't know any better. And the first 4 months of his life, we didn't have a diagnosis. All I knew was that he couldn't suck and swallow properly. He started losing weight. I had to keep the drapes closed all the time. And I was kind of looking around at other mothers walking their babies in the street. And I thought, what am I doing wrong? And, it just never occurred to me that there could be something wrong with his brain. Like that was the last thing that I thought of. But I remember my sister's pediatrician for her kids. My sister and I are really close, and she was quite worried about me because I was exhausted and freaking out that poor little Nicholas couldn't eat or couldn't seem to settle at all. And so she's mentioned this to her pediatrician, who happened to be a developmental pediatrician, meaning that he was a specialist in child development, which includes developmental disabilities. So her pediatrician said, I think your sister should bring her baby to a neurologist. And I said, oh, okay. So I said that to our pediatrician, who kind of poo-pooed it and said, oh, I don't think there's any. He said, who knows what makes the little turkeys cry? I remember he said that. And I thought, oh, wow, he really doesn't have a clue of what's going on in our house. So anyways, but we did get the neurologist, and he said, your baby has had a significant brain injury and will never be normal after one look. So, it was a terrible shock, but in a certain way, it was a relief that it wasn't me. Because I thought, if it wasn't me, then I'm going to read up. I can fix this. I was so young, so clueless. You do not fix cerebral palsy. You learn to live with it, and it is not you can live a great life with a disability, and we've learned this over and over again from our son, who is our great teacher. But at first I thought, okay, I'm going to dominate through the power of my love and my will. I will make this all better. All I need to do is learn what all those therapists and doctors know. If I learn that, I can apply this knowledge and make his life so much easier. And it doesn't work like that. Nature is in control of aging, of disability, of the progression of the way a different body works, and the forces that are at work, the forces of disease, the forces of muscle tone that affects people with cerebral palsy, or whatever it may be, the forces of aging. You can't stop these things. In a way, they're so natural. You have to figure out your path to give comfort and to do your best to navigate all of those systems in order to provide comfort and opportunity to contribute and to be heard and to participate and to love each other, because caregiving is always reciprocal. So, part of my job was to find ways that he could give back as well. So my husband was on the phone with him today saying, Nicholas, what are you going to do for Mother's Day? And I said, I was listening and I said, tell him I want a poem. I want him to write me a poem. Nicholas, I could hear him laughing on the phone. But he will do something special, and we expect that. And we enable him to do it because, of course, he can't do these things by himself. He needs help to do everything. So he will do something, and that will be wonderful for Mother's Day.
You have described system navigation. You've also described the path to a diagnosis, the path that we put ourselves on, which is I'm wrong here, I'm the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then you showed us the way to get off that path. I wonder if you could describe what it feels like for you to navigate systems and look for solutions, and then look for solutions, and then look for more solutions.
Yeah, it's exhausting. And it can be very difficult until there's a breakthrough. And sometimes, and the reason it's so difficult is that I think if families are sinking under the weight of care and not doing well and kind of really desperate, as we know so many family caregivers are, they're trying to provide more care and support than is actually humanly possible for them to do. And either it's more care, or the caregiver themselves is too old, or whatever. The circumstances are just not there to provide good care in a sustainable way where everybody has a sense of well-being. This is not happening in today's world very much at all. And so I think when you begin to advocate and put up your hand and say, I need help, if the situation progressively gets harder, worse, you get more desperate, you can't stop crying, all of that stuff, you kind of turn people off and you become persona non grata a little bit with the service providers. Like oh, not her again. All she does is ask for help that we can't really give, or she, you can see it. People turn away, don't want to make eye contact. So it can be very difficult when you're in a state of great need to advocate. And the one thing I would say is that every time when I've been in that place, I've been in that place many times. And when I have, my turning point has been an ally, somebody who believed me and believed in me and believed in our family, and who had some power to represent our need, our interests, and our well-being at decision-making tables. So I would always, I've learned over the years to try my best to locate those people and say, would you be my champion? Would you try to advocate for me and help me understand who is the person in this system who has the power to say yes to what we need? And would you please speak to them for me in all the times I can't speak for myself and be at every meeting? Will you be the champion? And sometimes it's been one person, and sometimes I've actually put together a committee where if there was a big, huge issue, like getting Nicholas a place to live with 24-hour nursing, that was a challenge. These placements do not normally exist. It's very, very hard people like Nicholas are supposed to die. He's been on the palliative care team since 2005. He has not died. So most places turn him down, saying, I'm sorry, his needs are too high. We cannot support him. We don't want to be liable. So we couldn't find a place for him to live that wasn't in our home. And home was not sustainable because my husband's 73. We can't, you got to stay awake all night for Nicholas. Keep him breathing. So no, we needed a team, a SWAT team of powerful people who would bring this forward and say we needed a one-off solution where people would throw out the rule book and say, okay, we can work together to figure this out.
I don't think that people get what that constant state of needing is like. It's a horrible place to be. It is a horrible place to be because your basic needs aren't met.
Yeah.
And then you need and need and need.
Yeah. And it's surprising how unpopular you become. People simply don't want to know, like they will turn away and stop being friendly. And that goes for system providers, but it also happens in friend circles too.
Yeah. I think about the people that you see facing you walking down the hall until they see you, and then they turn and just like run because they think, oh, here comes needy Denise.
Yeah.
Denise needs something, or she's not
Exactly.
going to ask me, but she's bringing her energy of neediness and I can't deal with that energy.
Yeah, that's so true. And, it's because it's a sort of similar to having a chronic disease. The disease is never going away.
Yeah.
And in some way, this is an insult to people who want to be helpful, but they want to be able to give what my friend Vicky Kamak calls a clean transaction of care. There, you're cured. Go away. Bye. Thank me now. Goodbye. But in our cases, this is not us. These are chronic situations where we might put out one fire, but there's still three other fires burning out of control at home. So people, it's sort of like, I often think about it as like, do you really want to stop and talk to that homeless person?
Yes.
Because how are you going to get out of that conversation? Like, where does this end? Will you be able to just say hi, hello, how are you? Fine, good, okay, bye. Or are you going to get sucked into a vortex of pain and need if you get into a conversation with somebody on the street like that? And I often think it's the same for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so I have two more questions for you. What helps you cope?
Well, it's funny, but what helps me cope is actually being with the people I care for. That's may seem like opposite to what I've said about the burden of care, but what helps me cope is okay, I'll just begin by saying if I'm not positive that the people I love are okay, that's the worst thing for me. If I get a call and I'm out of the country that Nicholas has gone to the emergency room by ambulance and I'm not there, that's my worst nightmare for sure. If he is very ill, he's in the ICU, my best calming thing is to lie down in bed with him and be close to him. So my antidote, what calms me down, what makes me happy is to know he's okay. And I would have said this about my mother too, to know they're okay. And if I'm not sure they're okay, I want to be with them. But I will always advocate for other people to do the care. What makes me happiest is to be a mom, to be a daughter. And that doesn't mean doing the G-tube feeds, ensuring that the medications are all filled properly, making sure that he receives his disability benefits and checking the bank accounts. I want my coping mechanism is to imagine what do I want to do as a mother, as a daughter. Take away the disability for a minute. What is my role as a mother? And be there and that person. And that fills my heart and makes me happy, energized. And we don't get that very much. We just don't. You don't even get 1 second of it if you're doing all the physical care. And speak to any disability parent and they will say, I mourn the loss of my role as a mother. Because all I do is the unpaid work, the work of caregiving. And I don't even know the last time I made eye contact with my child, because you're working all the time, like physically working around the house, doing stuff. And so, yeah, I feel really strongly that we have a right to that relationship, a human right to that relationship. And so I've used that language actually when I was fighting for support. I said, I want to be a mom again. I don't even remember being a mom anymore. And I want that. Please give that to me.
I don't think that people get that importance of being present. Because there are times when you are present and people see your ongoing presence and they will say, take a break.
Yeah.
And that it's not a helpful break at that moment. Because it's not draining to be there. Even if you look exhausted, it's where you want to be. I guess it's the choice of, I want to be here. Don't take me out of where I want to be because you think I need a break. Let me be.
Yeah, my friend Eva Kate is a philosopher and a caregiver, and she talks about this concept that she calls dulia, like doula, but dulia. And she says, when mothers have babies, it's automatic that everybody comes with food. It's automatic that the new mother's only job is to be with her baby, bond, feed, love, caress, soothe. That beautiful building of essential trust and the time it takes to be those first few weeks, first few months of life. It is assumed that the mother has all other needs related to the family and household taken care of by other people so she can focus on the baby. We don't apply this concept to other types of caregiving, and we should. Because yes, that's where we want to be. I mean, some people, Denise, you talk to caregivers every day, as do I. And I know some people are like this, like I can't stand, I want to be anywhere else but here. And that's true, but I would argue that that's because they have too much care work to do. And there's just crazy making amount of burden associated with the role. But if they had somebody else doing everything else and all they had to do was love and be with their person, you know, I think that this is not even imaginable what I'm talking about for most caregivers, but it should be. This is because this is what we need. The support to be good caregivers and good mothers, daughters, fathers, sons, husbands, wives.
Because what we're really still talking about is basic needs.
Yes.
So a mother has her basic needs met when she brings the baby home, and her mom comes, and her mother-in-law comes, and her friends come. She has her basic needs met. And in a caregiving situation, we are struggling because our basic needs are not met in any way. And you could look at basic needs across all aspects, right? Financial, relationships, social, career, ability to have outside interests, all of that I think is so important for us. I've been reading about nourishing or like flourishing during life. And if we don't have our basic needs met, it's impossible for us to flourish because we never get a break from the stress of having to need things and searching to have our needs met. And that is a horrible life experience. And when you are searching for two needs, two sets of needs, your needs and your caree's needs, it's double the awfulness. And yet we ask people to do that every day. We require people to do that every day.
Yeah. I think that we are in a crisis of care today. And I think that we are slowly inching toward a public recognition of this because of the numbers of people who are affected by it. But we're going to, I think, have to be very creative in local, state, provincial, federal solution making that is outside the box. And I think that people are experimenting with postal workers, with what could just neighborhood, we've got neighborhood watch, we've got community centers, faith groups. What can we actually do for each other? Because currently we don't know who lives next door and what's going on in their house. But we are going to have to get to know each other in a micro-local way, I think, and figure out as a matter of necessity, who are you and what could you give to your neighbor? What do you have to give? Do you know how to do something? Do you have 2 hours a week? What have you got to give? And somebody needs to coordinate sharing of human resources that are in neighborhoods. We've got to figure this out. And I know you've given it a lot of thought, Denise, and you've got some great ideas on that score.
I have not figured it out. The only thing I can share is that for a period of time, I lived next door to 2 sisters, and Sophie cared for Phyllis. Sophie was 87, Phyllis was 92. So they were older during caregiving, Sophie in particular. Sophie loved to go play bingo with her other sister, Helen, who was probably 90, on Friday nights. So they went to one of our local churches, played bingo. I stayed with Phyllis so Sophie could play bingo. So my Friday nights were spent with Phyllis. I think what you just described is exactly that. What are the resources?
Exactly that.
Yes. So we think about resources when you're raising kids. What are the resources when there are other things going on in the family?
Yeah.
And yet it's not something that's easy to make happen.
No, and I think because caregiving is invisible and undervalued, and we think that we should be able to meet all of the needs of all of the time. And if we don't, it's a failure of love, and it's a betrayal of our commitment to our family. It's a personal failure of character if we can't do everything all the time. So we need to, I think, have a public conversation about what people are being asked to do these days, which is people are living longer with much more complex healthcare conditions. Caregivers are doing advanced nursing practice at home without a lot of training and support. And having to, there is no time, you'd never clock out. So the sleep deprivation is just a huge issue. And so I think also coming out of the pandemic and the loneliness of the pandemic has made these issues, I think, I look at the executive order that President Biden signed last week. This is an acknowledgement of the care crisis, the work of caring across generations and what they've been able to achieve for frontline healthcare workers, holding hands in solidarity with family caregivers. And in Canada, we have the new Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence that is modeling themselves again along these lines and with the same goals. So I am seeing a shift, and I do feel hopeful that we are coming to a new tipping point where people, it's almost like we need a wartime effort, where victory gardens and everything, everybody has a role to play in fixing this problem, everybody. And it is our national and human obligation to step up. And I think we are going to come to that point because there aren't enough tax dollars. Nobody is going to rescue us from this. We have got to figure this out as a society.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about, for instance, the depression and the social programs that came out of it, because there was such a great need. We had to do something.
Have to.
Yeah, had to. So where is the WPA, for instance, for caregiving? That's what I always think about,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my last question. I'm not sure if it's a good question to ask, but I'm going to ask you anyway. If you could access a solution that you felt like helped you feel better, helped you cope more, what would that solution be?
That I would be able to choose. Okay, so let me just begin by saying this would be when this is when Nicholas, for example, would be at home with us, but the situation is not yet completely untenable, which was like that for the first 15 years of his life, I'm going to say, until it wasn't manageable on any level anymore. And then became the big fight to get the kind of level of support that we needed to be able to survive. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened. I think he would have to go to Children's Aid or something. We couldn't do it anymore. So I'm talking about when it was extremely challenging, but not impossible. So then I would say the helpful thing would have been if somebody had come to me and say, could you pick 3 things that your neighbors could do for you that we will commit to do and promise, and you don't have to worry about it anymore? And I know what I would have picked. I would have said 3 times a week, dinner delivered, and I need somebody to walk my dog, and I need somebody to take the dog if Nick's in the hospital. And so the dog, the food, and somebody to help with my daughter if Nick's in the hospital. So 3 things, and those aren't that complicated, right? Those are things that are any neighbor could reasonably help with, but they never did. And I mean, I did ask my friend, could she walk the dog? And she said, no, it's too hard to walk 2 dogs, because she had a dog too. But it's funny, but maybe I just didn't seem desperate enough. Maybe it wasn't like, I really need you to do this. It was more like, do you think by any chance you could? Anyway, everybody's different. And so maybe I did, part of this is that in asking for help, maybe the overlying big answer to this question is that, could there be a system set up where I wouldn't have to prostrate myself to ask in a way that people understood how important this is? That there would be some community calendar or something that I could just say, I need these things, and trust that they will be taken care of. Because I think that a criticism that I received, and Denise, I bet you did too, is, well, you seem so pulled together. You seem to have it all under control. And I, of course, didn't. And I maybe was just too ashamed to say, I need you to do this, and I need it now, and it's urgent. I just didn't know how to express that. Would you mind? Could you please? Do you think you might be able to? By the way, oh, it's nothing, but could you? Like, that was more like my presentation. And then if somebody hesitated, I'd say, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine,
I have thought about this because I have chosen to preserve a relationship. So that has often been the default, rather than really being the heavy about asking for and demanding help.
Yeah.
So my brother died a year and a half ago. I have an older sister who's not a part of the family. So my family has shrunken. And I have a younger sister and a brother. And I had a situation this past Christmas where my dad had COVID. And my sister, who actually does help him, was like, I'm not going to help him. And so she just kind of just walked away while he had COVID. And so I stepped up, obviously, and did everything I could and organized and managed. And I don't mean to say that I didn't want to help my dad, but it was this idea that my sister was just like, I'm not helping. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to just do all of this. And it really, honestly, I was very, very depressed about it. I really felt betrayed and let down. And yet I felt like I had to preserve this relationship with her. I didn't want to lose one more relationship. So I endured
really
it.
understand.
Yeah, I endured it. And I think sometimes that's what happens too. We see all these relationships fall away. And then we have just a few relationships left to ask for help. And we think, but I'm not going to be the heavy about whether or not they help me, because I don't want to have another relationship fall away. I think that's what we're weighing on a regular basis. And maybe it's not that we realize it, but we're weighing, this or that. And it's not an even scale. And
No,
it's not an easy choice. And yet that's what we're doing.
but sometimes people can offer different kinds of help than we immediately think about. Like, I don't know if there was any support that your sister could have offered without entering the house. Like a division of space and a division of labor based on people's capacity or talents or preferences. I always remember that Liz O'Donnell, who is a wonderful caregiver author who wrote Working Daughter, talked about her brother and with their parents. And her brother was like the golden boy, and, Liz was doing everything. And her mother would talk about, oh, well, your brother, when's your brother coming to visit? And, oh, I just love when he visits. He's so perfect. And, Liz is like, and she figured out, and I'm not drawing an analogy between your situation, which is totally different, but I'm just talking generally about siblings. Her brother, she realized, was good at making her parents laugh.
Yes, right. Yes. Yes.
So he would come in, sit down, not do a thing to help out in terms of what she was doing. But he would come down, he'd stay for like a good 3 hours, cracking jokes, and then leave. But she realized that her parents were on a high from that visit for about 3 days after. And so she kind of said, okay, that's what he does. And I guess that's okay. And I'm going to have to figure out in my head, that's okay. So she kind of did.
Same thing with this same sister, very much the social. I'm the worker, she's socialization. So I really figured out she brings a level of socialization that's just not a priority for me. And what I also figured out is she socializes with my parents and she can socialize with me. And that's how I can get a break. The challenge with this past situation was she has 3 adult children who were home for Christmas, and that was her priority. And so there wasn't a way for me to negotiate her helping, because she made it clear, I'm not going to help and I'm not going to jeopardize the time with my adult children. And I got that. I understood that. And it still hurt me deeply.
For sure.
Yeah, it still hurt me deeply.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think in a situation like that, where someone really demonstrates the limits
Yes, right.
to what they give,
Yeah.
that's hard to get over. There will always be a kind of side eye with that person where you think, I just don't trust you the same way I used to trust you. I just thought you would step up.
Yeah.
It's your father.
I know. I really worked on letting it go. Now, it doesn't sound as I'm talking about this that I have let it go, but in many ways, I have let it go because I want to preserve the relationship. My father is 91. He is going to be another family member who dies, and he's going to die within the next 6, 9 months, year, no more than a year, no more than a year. And I don't want the family to shrink any further.
No. Oh, I really understand that.
Yeah.
But it is a call to be compassionate to ourselves and to others, and to accept people's limits. She's setting limits for herself. And I don't know. I mean, maybe someday, few years after he dies, you could sit down and have a conversation with her and say, how did you come to grips after the fact with I mean, she can't have just put it out of her mind like she didn't care. I can't imagine anybody doing that. It must have kept her awake at night. And how did she get just okay and calm and not having this memory come back and haunt her of her decision and her choice in her father's moment of need. I mean, I don't know.
I think she just felt I was taking care of it, and that gave her the peace of mind she needed.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I guess that happens in families where you have the one who steps up all the time. So, yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting if she uh, ever has a great need that you have to be there for her. And what goes around comes around in life, and it will just be interesting if there's another opportunity to revisit these choices in different contexts and say, remember that time? This is the way I felt about it. And, I would never, just know that I wouldn't ever do that to you. So complicated in families, but people do demonstrate their limits, don't they? And
Yeah, they
sometimes
do.
it's very shocking.
Yes. Right. And yeah, it is shocking. It is shocking.
Yeah.
We went for just about an hour, if you can believe that.
Oh my goodness.
I know, and it felt like a minute.
I
So
know.
I just found this absolutely fascinating and helpful. And I'm so grateful for all you do and all you share and all you help. It's really a gift. And I'm grateful that you share your gifts with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure, Denise. And I just relish these conversations because I always come away with new ideas and new reflections and a new take on something that happened to me personally and how I feel about my life experience, which is in my adult life about 99.9% caregiving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Thank you, Donna, so much.
thank you.
And thanks everybody for watching. Check the show notes for links to Donna's book and to our previous video chat where we talked about PTSD and family caregiving. I'm Denise Brown, and we would love to also get your stories around managing these 17 caregiving systems. So I've also included a link in the show notes to schedule your time with me because I'd love to connect with you. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.